Welcome to the Calm Cockpit, where pilots of all levels can find high-performance tools, actionable strategies, and access to professionals who can help you fly smarter and stress less.
Today, we're diving into a skill that pilots need when pressure is on: resiliency.
We'll sit down with yoga educator Lisa Danahy to explore why resilience isn't about pushing harder, but it's about learning how to assess and regulate our nervous system.
We talk about the vagus nerve, box breathing, subtle movement, and other simple tools pilots can use to shift out of fight or flight and into clear decision-making.
Plus, we'll talk about why rest, self-compassion, and letting go of perfectionism are essential for calm, clear decision-making.
As always, we're keeping the tools practical, grounded, and designed for real-world flying.
The Calm Cockpit Podcast starts now.
Onyx 1-2 Mike Oscar, runway 27, clear for takeoff.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. I'm Geeta Brown, midlife student pilot and licensed yoga and meditation educator with over 30 years of experience in teaching high performers how to improve their lives without adding stress.
And I'm John Niehaus, professional pilot and flight instructor.
Today's episode goes right to the heart of what being calm under pressure actually means, not just as a mindset, but as a physical and physiological skill that you can train. And this resiliency is something we're going to really pick apart with our guest, Lisa Danahy, who is a yoga therapist. But first, we're going to do a little housekeeping here because today actually marks the final episode of season 1. Cue the crowd noise.
24 episodes, plus bonus episodes for eye health, meditation, good sleep, and breath work. We've got listeners from the US, the UK, Ireland, Germany, Southeast Asia, South America. I think there's even a couple Africa countries in there where we have listeners. So
Awesome.
A little bit of everything. So many different places, and we appreciate all of you. Goes to show that the need for pilots to have both performance tools and well-being tools is a common human need, and it just unites us all.
Makes my heart so happy. Thank you so much to our listeners. We appreciate all of you listening. And we also really enjoy receiving emails from you. It means so very much. Hearing you guys engage with this important work of this holistic living along with performance training, it really fuels both John and I. And one other little exciting piece of housekeeping here, in case you missed it, our very own John Niehaus was recently on the December broadcast of the famous aviation show, The Schiff Show, with legendary aviator Brian Schiff. They talked about, the title was Final Approach to Tragedy, Checklists and Discipline Gone Wrong. It was a detailed case study of a Learjet crash and its contributions of crew resource management, et cetera, to a catastrophic accident. I did a viewing party. I put it on my big screen TV with my popcorn and was cheering. I had like my Go John Go sign out, but I really do think he was brilliant. And of course, Brian Schiff was stellar as always about turning something that was a tragedy into a learning experience for us all. I will link to the replay of this in the show notes. It's also a special welcome to the new listeners who have found us as a result of John's brilliant performance on The Schiff Show. Welcome to you all. So glad you found your way here. And I think it's really cool that he's going to have Tammy Barlett, who runs Crosscheck Mental Performance Training, on his next episode of The Schiff Show, because she was our very first guest. So you can see this like cross-pollination happening and aviators being interested in this information. So really cool. Congratulations, John. Great job on The Schiff Show.
Aw, well, I appreciate it. Brilliant, I don't know, but I think it turned out okay, and I second all of that. Appreciate any new listeners. Hopefully you are liking the show so far, and we've got so much more to come with season 2 starting next year.
Yay!
So now, a little setup for today's interview. Our guest is a yoga educator and yoga therapist, Lisa Danahy, and she focuses on nervous system regulation, trauma-informed practices, and building real-world resilience for people operating under pressure.
She has a huge history and bio, which you'll hear of a little bit towards the end of the interview. But what you need to know about her going in is that she is the founder and CEO of Create Calm. She holds a Master of Science in Yoga Therapy along with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. So she knows the human being inside and out. She has more than 30 years of experience as a school administrator and also developing social emotional learning curriculum. And she's also certified as an advanced yoga educator and trainer. She's also an author of the book Creating Calm in Your Classroom, which is how we met her. And that book uses science-based, accessible, mindfulness-based movements, breathing exercises, and meditations for educators to bring into the classroom. And there's a lot of crossover with aviators, as you'll hear. In this episode, we really focused on resiliency with her and talking about how that's built through the nervous system, particularly through the vagus nerve and the body's response to stress, both real and imagined stress. So she's going to give us all those practical tools we love here in the Calm Cockpit that you can use both on the flight deck and in your real everyday life. Box breathing, subtle movement. And at the end, we get a little bit philosophical, really diving into the mindset of a perfectionist and things we can use to unpick that so that those challenging moments, that challenging landing doesn't stick in our head and then inform us in the future. So she really helps us to go deep and keep it practical at the same time. So with no further ado, let's get to this wonderful interview with yoga therapist Lisa Danahy. Welcome, Lisa Danahy, to the Calm Cockpit.
Well, hello. It's great to be here.
So I'm a yoga educator like you, and we share a lot in common. I've taught in schools and hospitals and all of those settings as well. And that's why I'm so happy to have you here today, because I think our podcast is not only about providing resources to pilots themselves, you know, those actionable tools and strategies they can use today, but also nudging the flight training environment forward so that we can start to integrate some of this stuff into our primary training. That's like my dream goal. So our conversation today will focus a little bit on those strategies for pilots, but also want to pick your brain as someone who has had success at integrating these practices into large scale institutional settings, what that experience has taught you. In particular, it's very timely because there's a recent study from the Griffith University in Australia that starts to shed some light on why some pilots handle in-flight emergencies better than others. I'll link that in the show notes so people can read it. But one of the things that came out of that is that beyond standard operating procedure and having good training, of course, to handle those initial action items in an emergency, some of the true differences in the crisis situations are happening because of the resilience of the pilot. The persistence and inner strength to handle stress and uncertainty was one of the things that emerged common among all the pilots they interviewed as being one of the key differentiating factors. And I was like, chills, full body chills. But I think a lot of people don't know what resiliency even means, really, what it looks like, how we train it. So I'd love to start there. What does resiliency look like? How can we identify it? And then, you know, what do you got for us? What strategies can we use to start to build it? Just fix that for us right now. Ready, set, go.
No pressure.
No pressure. But what does it look like, though? What does that even mean? What does resiliency mean to you?
So it's interesting that you said that because it comes up a lot, especially when you're working with children, because how do we build resilience in children so that they can be resilient adults? In my research and studies on the physiological systems of human beings, a lot of it seems to come back to what they call allostatic load. And allostatic load is your physiological capacity to bring yourself back to a regulated state. And it's related to the functions of the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal glands. They call it the HPA axis. And those three organs together, they work to respond to stress. They work to send out hormones, to increase heart rates, to do this physiological management so that we can engage in either flight and fleeing or freezing and pausing so that we can be active and protect ourselves or recoil and preserve ourselves. So what's key to resilience is being able to access that HPA axis and regulate our physiology. And research has shown that somewhere up towards 90% of all disease, dis-ease, is a result of our incapacity to manage our stress levels. And that all boils right down to the nervous system and how the nervous system interprets our state of being. So to me, resilience is this combination of being able to accurately interpret whether I'm safe or not, being able to productively engage with my environment and adapt, and then whether I can manage my physiological systems and keep them regulated. And that makes me able to ebb and flow, to dodge and pivot, and to be in that crisis and know whether it's that button or that button I need to push.
What a fantastic description. Lisa, what I hear you saying is that so often we think of resiliency as like it's how we think about a situation. It's like that mental construct, but I hear you talking about it at a physiological level, that there's things we can do. So you're training your automatic responses to be able to do that in the background without you needing to think about it. Am I hearing that correctly?
Absolutely. And the key entry point for that is the nervous system. I will resist the urge to talk a lot about this, but I get really excited when I get an opportunity to talk about the vagus nerve and the nervous system.
Go for it. That's why you're here. Learn us something.
So the vagus nerve is the longest, most complex cranial nerve. It goes from the base of your spine, actually through your face, through your jaw, down through your neck, through your chest cavity, and into your abdomen. And what's so cool about the vagus nerve is that it manages two-way communication. It is able to assess your physiological states and interpret what's going on with you sensory-wise and send messages up to your brain that you're okay or you're not. But it's also able to take the messages back out to the body and say, okay, make the heart rate go up, make the muscles contract. And so it's the messenger for this communication between the mind and body. So when we can figure out how to access that central pathway and what they call vagal tone. And again, that contributes to resilience. If I can attune to the inputs, the ups and the downs, then I can help manage it. But if I can tune into my vagus nerve and I increase my vagal tone, then I have a better capacity at knowing if it's in my mind, if it's in my body, and where I need to regulate it and level it out.
So we don't want just toned abs. We want toned vagus nerves, like vagus nerves. They used to be abs of steel. I don't know if we want a vagus nerve of steel, but the equivalent to that. But this is so cool because so often I think in Western culture, we get stuck in that top-down approach, the mental approach only. We get stuck there and we forget that so often that our bodies work in both directions. So what can we do to increase this vagal tone? And talking about a subtle thing here, Lisa, of being able to tell what is a physiological response due to a thought pattern of stress versus what is a physiological response due to like, oh, I'm coming down with the flu. Those are two different feelings. It's pretty subtle to discern that. How do we develop that ability to become aware of that and or tell me more about how to increase that vagal tone?
Yeah, so I think it's fascinating. You picked up on a really interesting point that we're constantly talking about thoughts, right? And how can I manage my thoughts and my feelings? And very rarely do we talk about what's going on with me physically, but often physical is much easier to tap into. And when you think about why you go to the doctor, most often you go to the doctor because you have a cough or a headache or there's something physiologically happening. But then when we say something's wrong, we say it's wrong, it's wrong from our head. So what I think we want to do is recognize that whether it is physical stress or emotional and mental stress, it is stress and it's showing up the same in the body. The nervous system doesn't sit there and go, oh, this is just a physical stress. I'm going to treat it this way. Oh, this is a mental stress. I'm going to treat it this way. The vagus nerve and the nervous system goes, whoa, this is stress. And the hormones release and the body reacts. So what I like to do in my yoga therapy sessions and a lot of times in groups of school teachers and kids, but also in corporate settings and different environments is help people recognize that you don't have to figure out where the stress is coming from. You just have to tune into your body. So the most simple thing I can do is not try to make a story around what's happening, but tune into what is happening in my body right now. So I know that if I'm getting ready to do something that makes me a little uncomfortable, it's going to tighten my chest, right? It's going to cause this constriction of muscles. And it doesn't matter if that's because I'm getting ready to walk or run or because I'm getting ready to face a fear. The constriction is there. So what can I do to release the constriction? Well, I'm going to shake my body. Right? If I shake my body, the muscles can't tighten. They soften a little. And what happens then is I take a breath. The number one way to access how you're doing is to do a breath assessment, to notice, where is my breath? Am I breathing? Can I manipulate the experience of my breath to shift my physiology so that I can release the stress? And then it doesn't matter whether the stress is physical or emotional. I'm responding to it all in a physical state. And I have a lot more control that way. Peter Levine wrote a book, Waking the Tiger. And he talks about stress and he talks about trauma. And in it, he does this analogy of when you have physical stress, you recognize when the physical stress is over so your body can recover. When you have emotional stress, it lingers. You don't say, oh, I'm done being afraid. You carry it with you. And then it turns into this whole story about, oh, I'm so dumb, I'm afraid. And, then it goes into this whole other belief system stuff. But he did this experiment where he took people and he figured out their optimal heart rate and their optimal exertion in running. And he had them run like a 50-yard dash. And then he took someone who was afraid of going into a public space and he had them go back away from the doors of a mall and run the 50-yard dash and then get to the finish line. And at the finish line, they stopped running. All of the tension and stress dissipated. They didn't have space for the fear because the fear left with the running and they walked through the doors.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So I guess I have a question. How does the body react differently to kind of a slow burn stress? So for a pilot example, like we go to training sometimes and a initial training on a new airplane can be a month. So you're starting that day one going, I know, and day 30, I got to take a really big test that could affect potentially my future at my position. So you've got that slow burn over a month versus being in an airplane and having an event happen and it's that sudden trauma of stress. What's the difference from a vagus nerve body side? And are there different techniques in dealing with that? Or is it somewhat similar and just how you react to it is different?
I think it's a really great question. I'm not sure I have all the answers on it, but I will say from my own personal experience and professional experience, you're talking about stress as learned, as reinforced in our own experience. We are risk averse by nature. And we prefer the familiar. We walk the same neuro pathways in our processing. So what tends to happen is, let's take a young child, for example. That child falls down, scrapes their knee, they get up, and they're pretty quick at going, all right, that was interesting. But the fourth or fifth time they have that injury, they start to have a different experience of it because they start to now anticipate the pain. They start to now have a history of the trauma and it lingers. And what it does is it creates an emotional level of stress and it gets them in their brain. They're switching into the limbic system. They're switching to the amygdala as the response source instead of the executive functioning of the higher brain. So they're actually going, uh-oh, this could be a dangerous situation. I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to launch into my fear response. And they detach from that calm, cool, collected, executive functioning frontal lobe space. So one of the things that I find most helpful is getting back to the breath. When I'm entering into a space where I have the potential to call on past memories, where I have the potential to over focus on the risk or my potential failure, where I go back into the stories of how I haven't been able to do this before, what I need to do is slow down and find my breath and come back to this very basic notion that in this moment, right here and now, I am okay. Where is my breath? Where is my body? I need nothing else but to feel that I'm okay and break that action of the amygdala, come back into the executive functioning, which is really hard to do.
That's why we have this podcast to tell people it is hard to do, and you're not alone if you're struggling with things like this. Even having someone say, hey, remember that you can take some deep breaths today and just get you started to do that 5 or 10 minute meditation can be enough to shift it.
If the people around you are holding a space of centeredness, of groundedness, of okayness, then you're more likely to feel okay. And so if you're sitting there surrounded by 30 other folks who are going, oh, crap, I might not be able to do this, all of you are going, oh, crap, right? Yep. So we want to surround ourselves with people of regulated states. And if they can't be regulated, then we need to be the regulator. And we need to offer that space of steadiness. So when we all breathe together, take a big breath in. Breathe it out, right? Do you feel that? That's where it's at. And Gita, you made this reference to, it's really hard to access and we're taking cues from our environment, but that's what's in the practice. Because you and I were yoga therapists, we know that it's a forever practice. But when we go to the yoga mat, we're not in the stress response. We're in that state of receiving and learning and growing. And so we create the physiology of the stress response so that we can play with it. We play with putting our bodies in challenging situations and putting our minds in challenging situations when we're on the yoga mat so that in real life, when it happens, we can access it. And that's that emergency response. That's resilience. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to tap into it in a crisis if I never tap into it outside of the crisis.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Amen. Preach. Yes, absolutely. So what would you recommend then for pilots who are interested in starting to train this vagal tone in doing some little experiments with, maybe daily? Let's say they're going away to a training. They've got a month. They're like, I'm away. I'm at this training for a month. Most of their day is going to be spent in the classroom or in the simulator, but they know that they have little pockets of time where no one's seeing them, what they're doing. They're behind closed doors. What would be the things that you would recommend for like a beginner to start to access some of this stuff in a way that's actually going to work? Because there's a lot of junk out there. If they just type in yoga breathing, who knows what they're going to find. So what would you recommend that they do sort of as a beginner that's maybe, 10 minutes a day where they can just start to explore?
You want to try a couple things?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So you can be sitting or standing. You can be in a big space or a tiny little space. All right. Okay. First thing I want you to do is take your feet and tap them on the floor. Just let them like kind of stomp or tap or dance, or you can even shuffle them. Yeah. Now plant your feet on the floor. Take a big breath in. Fill your whole self up with breath. Hold it for a moment. Push down into your feet and then exhale and let it go. Feel your connection to the earth. Good. Now sit up a little taller. Take another breath in. As you breathe out, relax your shoulders. Make some circles of your shoulders. Maybe even play with this notion of your shoulder blades sliding along your back ribs like hands, giving you a little massage. Wiggle your shoulders. Hollow out your armpits like you're putting tennis balls in your armpits. Yeah. Now let your shoulders relax. Take another big breath in. This time open your mouth and say, ha. Yeah, now I'm going to ask you to make a really big sound and make a vibration through your throat. Do it again. Big breath in. Ah. Yeah. Now rub your hands together. Now take your hands as you're rubbing them and think, where does my body need a little extra love, a little aliveness, or a little calmness, a little energy, a little soothing? And when I count to 3, I want you to take your hands and put them wherever they need to go. 1, 2, 3. Take a big breath in. Breathe out and feel that love. Feel that connection. You can even let your hands move if they're somewhere else. Let your hands slowly move around, helping you to relieve tension, helping you to tune in and check in and notice how you feel. And then do a little wiggle. Start to wiggle your body in ways, not overstretching, just little teeny subtle ways that help you sort of come back to center. Make some noises. Give yourself a yawn. Now take your hands and shake them. Shake your hands, shake your arms, and shake your whole body. Shake it, shake it, shake it, shake it, shake it, shake it. Like everything. Like see if you can shake your eyeballs or your eyebrows, your ears. See if you can shake your collarbones and your knees all the way down to your toes. Shake your toes. Now reach your arms up in the sky. Take a big breath in. Reach, 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 reach. As you exhale, bring your hands down in front of your heart. Palms together, press here. Do that one more time. Bring your arms out to the sides. Reach up. Take a big breath in. Hands together. Bring them right down to the middle. And say, ha. Tell me how you feel.
That was good.
Awesome.
What do you notice, John? Tell me what shifted for you, or what did you experience?
It's maybe a little like tingling almost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Warmth, maybe.
Good. Gita, how about you?
I feel more awake. Not that I was sleeping before. Come on. But yeah, I mean, I said I've been getting over a cold, and I feel like that's just kind of like that permission to put that warmth on my neck. I was like, oh yeah, I am so blocked up there still. And just that moment of just connection. A little body breaks like that are so powerful. And you know what I found in professional training situations, not related to yoga, like conferences and things, I'll be the dork in the hallway doing exactly that. Like that will be me. Yeah. People will start to come around me and be like, oh, that looks like it feels really good. It is amazing when you give yourself permission to do that little, I would call it a self-regulation exercise you taught us. Other people notice, and it's like it gives, and before you know it, there's like all these people around me going,
Well, I'll tell you, actually, I did it several months ago before I was getting ready to get on a plane. And I had a stressful couple of days. I had stress getting to the airport, and I'm sitting there, and I did that, and I stood and I did some breathing, I did some shaking, and I sat down, and I started to actually record a little meditation, and somebody turned to me and said, I feel so much better now. And she goes, will you come on the plane with me? And I said, I'm getting on the plane with you. She goes, I think you should get up and do that for everybody.
One of my favorite things is teaching high schoolers on Friday afternoons. This is the last class of the week that they come in for yoga. So you can imagine by Friday at, 2:45, they're like done. They come in completely dysregulated all over the place, usually extremely tired. And they're not so much tired as they're just sick of school. Like, I don't blame them. They're tired of school because as soon as school's over, then they have energy. But my point is they come in, they're all over the place, not able to concentrate, all the usual things, a lot of behaviors. By the time they leave the class, their facial affect is soft. They're not interrupting each other anymore. They're moving calmly and slowly. And the teachers come in, they look around the room like some weird thing has happened. They look in the door and they go, what did you do to those kids? My husband's like, tell them you put Thorazine in the water. I'm like, no, it wasn't Thorazine. It was yoga. I was like, it wasn't me. It was literally like 30 minutes of permission to take some deep breaths, to uncrumple the body. It's the greatest, hits of stress reduction yoga. It doesn't take a lot. So my question for you is, you just gave us that little permission in the middle of a podcast to do a resiliency reset. if say we're a pilot in command and we're in a multi-crew environment like John flies, let's say we can't necessarily do a body break like that. But what are the ways that we as pilots can carry that sense of stability and calmness just as like a force field around us so that people around us can benefit from that? Do you know what I mean? It's like when you're near somebody who is so stable and so calm, they influence everybody around them. John, you said it in one of our latest episodes. You said it only takes one pebble in the water to like bring everyone down. But we can be the effect in the opposite direction. Lisa, what recommendations do you have so that we can cultivate that air of calm stability around us? Any tips for that? I guess you can't fake it if you don't have it internally.
I think that's what it is. I think a couple things come to mind. First of all, that is our innate state, is that calm, that tingly, that spaciousness that you noticed a moment ago, John. That's who you are. It's just the other stuff is louder, right? And so the more we can come back to that space ourselves, the more we can offer that space to others, the more they tune into it. And I think so practice is important, but I also think it's a resilience. Honestly, it's the capacity to separate myself from everything else enough that I know I'm connected to it all, but I don't have to be impacted by it all. I have choices all the time. I have choices. And I also think an important thing is when I'm out of balance, when I make the less than ideal choice, that I don't beat myself up around the consequences, that I'm forgiving and compassionate. And I think that the more I hold a space of grace for myself and everyone around me, the more I am in that calm state, the more I am in my essence. And knowing that people are going to make mistakes, people are going to hurt my feelings, I'm going to hurt people's feelings, I'm going to make horrible mistakes, I'm going to do some things that really screw things up, and I'm going to be accountable, and I'm going to say, hey, I realize I did that, but I'm not going to carry it with me and say, oh my gosh, there you go again. And I'm going to have a sweet space inside of me that says, and this is how I end every class with those crazy teens, with those little toddlers. We take a few balloon breaths, that bringing your hands down in front of your heart breath, and we pause there. And I ask them, how do you think you did today? Did you do your best? And then I tell them, the answer is yes. You're always doing your best. Even when the outcome isn't what you expect, even when it's not what other people want from you, you're always doing your best. And when you stay in that space of okay and knowing that I'm doing my best right now, then there's a calmness and a steadiness. You're not in that fight-flight response.
I think of those leaders that we have or those teachers that really impacted us. I think they really exemplify that. I mean, I remember I've been flying solo a lot lately, just training towards my first check ride. And so it's been great. I've just been able to rent the plane and just go out and just do stuff. It's been awesome. But then I flew with my flight instructor. So immediately comes in that I better show him how much I've been practicing and how good I've gotten. You know, the mental chatter starts right up. So I did do a landing. It was fine. It was a little flatter than I would have liked. And I said that. I said, that was a little flatter than I would have liked. I would have liked to have kept the nose wheel off a little bit more. He just shrugged. He was like, yeah, it works for me. It was like exactly what you just said. Like he wasn't like, yeah, you're right. You know, you really shouldn't. He could have in that moment said just one little negative thing and it would have stuck in my head. And then I would have gotten this complex about my landings are good and blah, 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 blah. So I think there is this line that we're talking about here with aviators, though, between we need to have high performance outcomes because the safety of ourselves and the people on the ground and our passengers depend on it. And the line between that high performance and perfectionism is like a razor's edge. And I hear you offering us strategies of self-talk that we can use to make sure that we're doing, in the words of Tammy Barlett, we are striving for perfection, but we're not being a perfectionist. And so I hear you saying that finding phrases we can tell ourselves at the end of the day to do an accurate self-assessment of I did my best, and then leaving it there and moving on, and then using the breath to reset as like it's almost like putting it in gear. I'm taking this breath, and that breath is the end point of that previous thought and the beginning of the now. So I hear those as, real strategies. I want to loop back to something you said earlier that was kind of like mic drop moment where you said you can't call on these things in an emergency if you don't practice them. So I'm hearing breath work being a practice, some type of movement stuff. What kind of breath practice do you recommend for a beginner? Is it like 5 minutes a day of that slow, deep breathing? Should people be using apps? Should they find a teacher? Like, the breath can be very elusive and confusing.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as soon as we started talking about what would you recommend, I held my breath.
Right? It's like,
I did. I'm like, I think one of the strategies that worked best for me was engaging in movement and sounding, because when you move vigorously, it invites the breath. And when you sound, you need to exhale. When you sing, you're exhaling to make the sound. You're creating a really deep exhale.
Yep.
You're activating your parasympathetic nervous system. So what I might recommend to the real beginner is just notice and give yourself an opportunity to exhale. Just go, huh. It's really, you can tell beginner breathers, and we all are not beginner breathers. That's wrong. Beginner conscious breathers. If we're not breathing, if we haven't been breathing, then we're not here. But, it's the people who aren't comfortable making sound, right? It's socially unacceptable to sit there and go, right?
Try it out on the flight deck, John. Go ahead. Hang on. I need to center myself for a moment.
Right.
Why not? Why not? Let's change the standard, right? I think it would be great if I was sitting in my seat and we were getting ready for takeoff and you got on and said, all right, everybody, before we go, I want us to all do horse breath together. Ready? All right, I'm good. How about you?
Maybe Southwest Airlines would do that.
But in all seriousness, there are a great many tools. Setting a timer and breathing is very stressful. And so it tends not to work for me. I like the little bit more indirect approach. Go jump rope for 10 seconds or 20 seconds and then just notice your breathing patterns. Put a hand on your chest and a hand on your belly and just notice, can I feel my breath? Can I find my breath? And exert yourself a little so it's easier to feel it and find it. And then when it slows down, go, oh, wow, I'm noticing it. And one of my favorite strategies is to just take 5 breaths. And with each of those breaths, count to 5 on the inhale and 5 on the exhale. And then after I've done that, maybe the next time I try that 5 breath round, I do 5 on the inhale. I hold it for 5. I exhale for 5 and I hold empty for 5. They call it box breathing. And I'll notice sometimes I only get to 3, sometimes I get to 8, so where am I with that? But 5 breaths for 5 seconds each piece of the breath would be my recommended way of starting.
I love that. And you know what I have found? Because I came to flying from a fear of flying. I had all that history, like 20 plus years of all this breath work, blah, sitting there on the cushion, breathing so long. But when I was in that fight or flight, trying to get on a commercial plane, I needed the count. I needed to go inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. When your brain, amygdala is firing, being able to sit there and go, oh, I'm a yogi. Let me do this alternate nostril breathing. I could not even figure out how to do it, but I could count and I could hold the breath and then I could count again. It is that John sometimes calls it break in case of emergency technique, but you're absolutely right. If you don't train it when you're chilling in the hotel room or at home, you don't have it. I love that idea though. The 5 breaths, in for 5, hold for 5, out for 5, hold for 5, and then just do that box around. Yeah. And that's great because it's concrete. You can use your fingers and count it. And what I love about that, no one even has to know you're doing it. Yep. You could do it on a break somewhere. You could just be sitting there quietly doing that. So that will increase our vagus nerve tone, which will get us out of that fight or flight response and will get our brain clicked back on so we're more calm and alert and aware. You mentioned the parasympathetic nervous system. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and why do we as pilots care about shifting that? How does that help us with all of this?
Yeah, so our autonomic nervous system has an activation state and a calm down state. The activation is the sympathetic and the calm down is the parasympathetic. We need both. I think in our world right now, everybody's saying, oh, calm down, calm down, calm down. But they're really meaning get in control, get in control, get in control. And so what I mean by parasympathetic calm down is actually relaxed and not necessarily in control, but okay where I am. And so we use the nervous system, the vagus nerve, we use physiological experiences to bring us into a heightened state of energy in the sympathetic or a lower, calmer state of energy in the parasympathetic. And this is at the heart of all of my practices and of my writing and my work as a yoga therapist. Is I would love for us to get away from the need to label what we're experiencing or how we're feeling or who we are, and just notice our energetic states. Do I have super high energy or do I have super low energy? And how can I bring myself to a regulated energetic state? And that 5-5-5 breath lets me look and assess, oh, look, my energy's up here. I need to, I can bring it down, or my energy's down here. I can bring it up. And that little mindfulness break that we took, it allowed you to kind of be active and be calm. It raised your energy. It lowered your energy. It let you play with it like a little slinky. If you're from the old days, you know what I'm talking about. It lets you play with the slinky, and it's a little tingly because you're going, ooh, I see, I feel. And it lets you be okay with exactly where you were. And so I think that the key is remember when you're in an activated state, like you said a moment ago, I practice all this stuff on my mat, but then in the moment, well, where is it, right? Well, so instead of, having this like really robust toolkit that sits on my yoga mat, what I want to do is be able to go, where's my energy? What's going on with my energy right now? Okay, my energy is super high. Well, that's not when I'm going to go and try to sit still and meditate. When my energy is high, I'm going to move my body and I'm going to get into the energy, and then I'm going to go, come on, energy, let's go down a little, right? When I'm super low, and I'm sure you've seen these folks, this happens a lot when I'm working with kids. Parents are like, in the morning, they won't get out of bed. And I'm like, yeah, because you bust the door open, you go, come on, let's go, and these little beings are like, no. And so if your energy is really low, meet yourself in that soft, sweet spot. Roll your shoulders a little bit, rub your body, give it some love, and then get it moving. I didn't ask you to hop right into that energetic space, but we got there. And if you're really energetic, I want you to feel that bigness and know that there's nothing wrong with it, because as much energy or as little energy as you have, it's all part of you. So let's stop saying one is good or bad. Let's just feel where we are, know where we are, and go, okay, it doesn't feel like where I want to stay.
I hear some great wisdom in that. It called it neutral compassion. I think it was a previous guest. It might have been Dr. Adrienne Adler-Neal talked about that's the tool that she really recommends. I've heard you say a bunch of times, be okay with where we are. And I'm thinking of myself flying single pilot operations. So important to be able to discern what's actually happening, not what I'm expecting to happen, what I think is happening, what happened the last time, right? But be able to actually observe what is happening. And I feel like if I spend this time that you're saying practicing this skill of this neutral observation of just where am I can see that translating into the cockpit environment of being able then to assess your environment instead of what I wish it was or what I think it should be or the story I have about what button I just pushed and what I'm expecting to have happen. Being more neutral, literally just being okay with where you are. John, you said it once, like when an emergency happens, is it a one sip on the cup of coffee and then you take action, or do you take 2 sips of the cup of coffee and then you take, it's like just this ability to be okay with where you are instead of being so reactive. I think that's brilliant. So just a little reflection. When I had my fear of flying, it got really, really bad. I was still taking commercial flights, but it was not pretty. And I worked on it primarily by really getting my parasympathetic nervous system to turn more on. So planes became associated with a massive state of relaxation for me, where I would just go limp noodle. And then I started to ask myself to fly. And my teacher would be like, you need to take command authority. And I'm like, but I have spent 6 months training myself to chill out and let go of control. Because when you're a passenger, you just gotta let go. Just give it up, because you're just in seat 4B. So that ability to shift between, I heard you say it, be active, but be calm. This is sort of what I hear running through all of the stuff you're talking about. Be active, but calm. Be okay with where you are. But that ability to be active, but calm seems like it can come through all of these things you are describing to us. Is that accurate about what you've been talking about?
Yeah, that's present moment awareness.
Present moment awareness.
That is alignment, that is attunement, accountability, and being able to, I said this the other day to someone, to decipher, discern, decide. Right. So in any space, I'm just tuning back into me. I'm looking at what's happening around me, and I'm noticing what I really need to respond to and what I can really just sort of let go. I wanted to make a point too, because I do a lot of work with folks who have anxiety, and anxiety is this like thing everybody's talking about now. And I watched a documentary, and I cannot remember the name of it. It was a documentary where a gentleman was having kind of a crisis time, and he went off. His wife actually sent him to the Patagonia Mountains to hang out with a bunch of monks and to get his mindfulness on, right? Get his self together. So anyway, so he's there talking with these guys, and he says to this one monk, he says, "So what do I do? How do I address this fear, this anxiety?" And the monk said, "Well, which is it?" And he goes, "Fear, anxiety." And the monk says, "No." He says, "Anxiety is this informational space. It's this informant that we have that tells us physiologically there's a change. Something's changing, something's happening." And he goes, "Fear is a chosen response to the framework of the anxiety." And so he said, you get this anxious moment and you can choose, am I going to ride that experience or am I going to resist that experience? Resisting the experience is the fear response. Riding it is excitement. So notice the difference, right? When I approach something that feels like a change, a shift, something's calling on me to act in a different way than I have been in the last moment, I can go, "No way," and be fearful, or I can go, "Whoo, okay," and I can go. And he built the analogy of a baby being born. And he said the baby's in the womb going, "Oh, changes are coming." And the baby goes, "I'm not going." Or the baby goes, "Oh, what the heck? I'm in for the ride." Right. And so if we can approach all of these situations in our daily happenings and go, "Oh, I feel that tightening in my chest. All right, cool. That means something's happening. It means I'm experiencing my life. What am I going to do with it?" And there are times when I can go, "Oh, no." And that's the right response. But I could choose to also say, let's see where it goes.
How we talk about these things is so important, right? I mean, John, you called me out on it the other day. I'm getting ready to do my first cross-country night flight, and I have some old fears from the past. Flying at night isn't safe, and, all this mental story that still is in there. Good Lord. And he just looked at me. He was kind of like, "Yeah, I don't think your risk assessment is quite accurate there. It's really not that much different than flying during the day. If you need emergency land, there's an airport. You land there or you go on a highway, just like you would during the day." Just him saying 3 sentences, it was like poof, like reframed it, and the fear went away. So how we talk about this stuff is so important. So thank you for that, John. Very public. I want to just loop to a totally different topic for a moment here while we have you. Can you talk to me for a little bit about rest? I'm thinking about busy pilots, schedules that are all over the place, travel at different time zones, truncated rest, all the things. What do pilots need to do about rest? Like, you can talk about sleep if you like, or if you'd like to talk about those midday strategies for just getting that psychological, physiological reset. Like, what do pilots need to know about rest, about sleep, and those impacts you mentioned at the beginning of the show about the correlation of stress and disease and our longevity?
Yeah, I think my work on promoting rest came from my own personal experience. When I first started doing yoga, sort of more officially, the idea at the end of that practice of lying there still and doing nothing was excruciatingly painful. Because it was the time when the darkness filled the thought spaces and I just felt like I was wasting time. Well, the more I did it, the more I came to realize, and I had some wonderful teachers who helped me understand it, that rest is the space of integration. Sleep is a workspace. When we're asleep, our body is trying to repair, it's trying to purge. Our digestion, our circulatory system, our cellular systems are all trying to refresh, right? So it's a really active state. So we don't get a lot of opportunity to rest in sleep unless we sleep a very long time and we've let all those other systems come into their state of regulation. So offering a space of rest is really where the integration happens, the letting go of what was and the coming into what is going to be. And so I personally feel that one of our biggest challenges is that we are all never experiencing rest. What happens when I tell you, maybe you should take a siesta? Or, this notion of what? A midday nap? I think it's the pausing with the practices that we've talked about before. You don't have to separate yourself from life to rest. You can find these spaces of rest in the middle of what you're doing. And you can give yourself permission to take 5 breaths, to sit still and quiet, to move, so that as you move, you release energy and tension and you come to a place where you go, and you pause. And you are right. Without that pause, we have no opportunity to integrate what we've been experiencing. We tend to hold on to it. We tend to stay in a chronic stress mode. And so, yes, sleep is important, but giving yourself a true space of beta wave in between consciousness and unconsciousness floating is far more, in some ways, efficient and essential to who we are. And one of the best ways to do that, if you haven't had a practice on your own, is to find some recordings. I am trained in what they call yoga nidra. And nidra means sleep in Sanskrit. And so it's guided sleep. And it's this process of taking you through visualizations into a place between thinking and sleeping. This neutral space of expansiveness, of witnessing, of being able to detach from the physical and the mental for just a moment. And some research says that 20 minutes of yogic sleep equals 3 hours of standard sleep. So it's like this superpower nap. And you can find these recordings on Insight Timer or on on Calm, on, these other apps. You can find them on the internet. You can hire someone to do them for you. You can go to a session, but you can build these little breaks, these 10, 15-minute breaks in of this guided visualization that allows you to tether the mind with the visualization and still the body for relaxation so that you get this really nourishing integration and resetting.
Preach. I love it. Because people do resist it. I cannot tell you how many students have come up at the end saying, why do we do that laying down at the end? I have so many other things I could do. I'm like, really? You're going to change your whole life in 10 minutes? Really? Yeah. But then once people do it, then the proof is in the pudding. They're hooked. We can talk about it all day long. But once you do a couple of those and you feel the effect, I know for me, letting go was one of the hardest things I ever did.
Yeah. Well, and I want to point out, I want to go back to when we did that little break, when we did that movement and breath work. At the end, we paused and we just sat for a moment and tingled and felt warm. And that was rest. That was that space of integration where we went, ooh. I'm okay doing nothing, just watching.
Yeah.
That's where we want to be. So it doesn't take long.
That's brilliant.
It's transition. We don't let ourselves transition anymore. And when we don't give ourselves that transition, that's when we carry that back stuff with us into the future. So take 5 breaths, count to 5, give yourself that permission to say, that experience ended. Here's where I am now. Fresh start over and over and over and over.
So that is a great segue into a question that I have. And I think we've covered it in different ways through this interview already. So forgive me, I'm not asking you to necessarily repeat yourself, but maybe summarize some of these things. The pilot brain is sometimes a dangerous place to be. Geeta likes to joke that she's a recovering perfectionist. I personally am in the absolute throes of trying to achieve the 100% that is not possible. And of course, we've talked about the idea of making a mistake, which everybody does. We've talked about the idea of how that bad landing, or that, in my case recently, and we won't get into details, but the wrong button push, how that tends to, at least in my case, like I said, jokingly and sometimes not jokingly, I might be thinking about that wrong button push for the next week. How do we keep from letting that control us? Are there easy tips? And, me, always an easy tip or hack to get out of these things. What can we do to try to keep that from controlling our minds while we're trying to move on? Like you said, transitioning into letting go and keeping yourself from that kind of negative self-talk, which is easier said than done. But how can we try to move on from those things and go, okay, yes, that was in the past. I will do better next time. But then that little voice is like, or maybe you'll make the same mistake again.
So I have a question for you. What if 100% is who you already are, and you're just letting yourself have the mistakes to get back to remembering that you're already 100%? What if you're just giving the opportunity to play with imperfection because you're already perfect, but you want to remember? So you're giving yourself the opposite.
I don't want to remember.
It's painful it's painful.
But what I want you to remember is that you're already perfect. So when you make the mistake, what if you just went, that was interesting, and not let it define who you are? Because who you are is not limited to the mistakes. Who you are is this magnificent being that is whole and 100%, regardless of what button you push. When I do something, I used to beat myself up really bad. I used to be really good at shame and blame and ruminating. And I'm a recovering perfectionist.
Yep, that's me.
I'm a ruminator.
100%.
So now when the thought starts to come in, because I do these practices of tuning into my mind and body more regularly, I take on more of a witness space and I go, that's an interesting story you're telling yourself. You really think that you're incompetent because you made that mistake? So where are all the places you were competent? Oh, wow. Look at all the times I pushed the right button. So that means if I'm capable of pushing the right button more than the wrong button, I'm really not incompetent. It was just, I pushed that button this time. And that's a hard sell. It's really hard to do. But I think the more we look at ourselves with a little humor and a little grace, I think I said this way back when we were starting our conversation, it's amazing how much kindness and grace we extend to other people. You were so good at saying, Kita, flying at night is the same as flying in the day. You got this. And I imagine she turned to you and say, pushing that button or the other button, it happens. It's okay. But we can't say that to ourselves. We go, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot.
Yeah, I hear you say it's like this fundamental difference between deciding who we think we are. Like, do we think that we are imperfect and flawed, and therefore we need to be fixed and we need to prove? Or do we live from a space of, I'm here, I'm worthy just because I'm here, everything's already all good? I like your method because it sounds like life is play and life is always learning then. Always playing, always learning. Because for me, what would happen if I make a mistake in flight or like in music, if I have the old attitude, then I'm like, I just made a mistake. And then I make another one. And then I perseverate on that one. And it's like this spiral. Whereas I'm increasingly more now, thank God, in my 50s, shifting to play and learning. I go like, oh, isn't that interesting? Didn't expect that to happen. All right, cool. What else could I do with it? And it's like you can pivot on a dime. And it's like watching like Michael Jordan play basketball. Some of his best games were when he had the flu and he could barely walk, because even his mistakes, he could kind of just play with it and turn it into something instead of reacting to the story it meant about him. So we're getting at those deeper levels of that subconscious programming. Who do you actually think you are? And I always just bring it back to, how would you speak to a child? Would you speak to a 2 or 3-year-old the way we speak to ourselves? You never would do that. We're just those little kids. We're just bigger. and have
Truth.
more money.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess.
And honestly, and I see the eye rolling out there right now of
Oh,
those
totally.
listeners who are going, well, that's a bunch of bull. You have no idea the
Yeah.
pressure I feel.
Yep.
When I make a mistake, lives are at risk. This is big. This is urgent. This is important. And I agree with you. That's a really important story to periodically remember. But the truth of it is, everything feels like that enormous weight and responsibility. Every mistake feels as enormous when we allow it to. And so what I'd like us to do is also realize that when you do make the mistake, you do look at that child who made that mistake and you say, it's okay. And as the person making the mistake, I mean, I've done some really hurtful things in my life. I've done some things that have injured people physically or emotionally, or in my mind, I feel like that. And what I need to do is go and say, I'm sorry, and be humble and vulnerable. How can I help you? And instead of beat myself up over it, go, wow, okay, yikes, that feels big. That feels heavy. That feels tough. And then give myself the space to feel it and then own it and say, okay, but it's not who I am. It's how I feel right now. It's how you feel right now. And so to make that separation between how it feels and who I am.
That's a big distinction. Usually those two are the same. I feel responsible for the 150 passengers who are behind me. Therefore, I am responsible. Therefore, if I make the tiniest mistake, I'm a horrible person, and on and on and on. But yes, a lot of our culture does not celebrate that self-worth of just, you deserve to be here just because you are here. So I'm going to say it. Pilots, you deserve to be here. Just because you're here. I will be that yoga teacher because it's true. And I've seen the transformation in people's lives and their minds when they begin to accept themselves in the ways that you're talking about, Lisa, because then they suddenly have so many more choices for their responses to things. And those are the people that I see go on to actually become leaders, the ones who are willing to be vulnerable and to not hold themselves to overly rigid perfectionistic standards are actually the ones that rise to the top over the time, which we think it's the opposite. And they're resilient, bringing it all home. Look at that. It's like we planned it.
But man, that's not easy.
It is not easy. It is such hard work. This is why we have the podcast and guests like you, Lisa, on to just keep digging into these corners a little bit and like unpicking that conversation about the pilot mindset, that there is the standard operating procedures and the training, but then there's also all that underneath stuff that's like informing like our own, we think we're badass because we fly, but that gets us into a lot of trouble as well. And it's actually a little bit, in my mind, a little bit of a dangerous mindset. I'd much rather have someone who's up there willing to play and be interested in their mistakes than feel like they can't make any because it's going to be a referendum on who they are.
Well, you think you're great right up until that humble moment that happens to all of us. And that humble moment is 2 times more humbling than it otherwise should be.
So it's the space of it's the space of I am great and not.
Oh, I love that. That's like total permission. I am great and I'm learning. I'm always learning.
Yeah.
John, any last questions for Lisa or comments? Anything else rolling around?
Well, I don't so much have a whole lot of questions left. Well, actually I do, but we would have to do 2 or 3 more episodes, I think. What I would like to highlight on, and Lisa, maybe you can help me out a little bit. You have such an interesting history of work. You're a prolific author, and I want to talk about the book that you are releasing or have already released. And I know you have a bunch of different websites. I'd like to just kind of summarize, tell us a little bit about the book. Let's talk a little bit about some of the websites you have. How can people get a hold of you if they want to chat with you further? Let's just learn sort of a little bit of give me the shameless plug.
So thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit more about me and how to get in touch with me, because I do love to connect with people, and you can tell I love to talk about this stuff and to feel this stuff with others. So I wrote a book based on my years of experience as a yoga therapist, but before that as an educator. I'll try to make this brief, but way back when I was younger, in order to pay my way through college, I became a legal secretary. I was studying psychology. In the law firm, I went into human resources. services and law firm management. But then I had kids, and even though I rolled my eyes at my grandmother who did yoga and my mother who meditated, there I was with family and career, and it was all kind of crumbling around me, and I went to find some yoga. So yoga became my source of stress relief. And then as my kids were growing up, I was on the board at their childcare center, and I ended up becoming the director of their school. Spent 20 years in early childhood education. And in the late 1990s, I actually brought a friend of mine in to teach yoga as a tool for social emotional learning in the classroom with teachers and kids. So that was really where I got this notion of helping people use these tools really practically in their daily experiences. And then as my kids grew up and they left the nest, I decided that that third child of mine, that school, was ready to go off on its own too. And so I became a full-time yoga therapist. So for the last almost 15 years, I've been bringing these tools of resilience building, of social emotional learning into schools through my nonprofit, Create Calm, and into private and community settings. So it's been a lot of fun, and it culminated most recently in this book, Creating Calm in Your Classroom. And while I wrote the book that way because it's a nod to my experience as an educator and being in the trenches of early childhood education, what space isn't a classroom? You know, we've spoke today about all the same tools, about all the same things. I think whether it's a boardroom, a cockpit, or a classroom, you know, we're all the same humans being. So it's been really fun to share the tools and to be part of helping people find more joy and feel into their juiciness.
I have to say, every single question I asked you, I got pretty much from your book, Creating Calm in the Classroom. You know, went through it and I was like, okay, these are the main topic areas, and pull from that. So I actually feel like it is, Creating Calm in Your Classroom. I feel like everyone should just buy it, because in reading it, I'm like, well, there's some stuff that is specific to a classroom, but everything is applicable to daily life, because all of the things you're talking about is all right there. So I highly recommend the book. And also, I know that a lot of pilots are parents. I would highly recommend getting the book for that as well. It is exactly the kind of parent who has that book, who goes to the classroom teacher and says, hey, can we have yoga in the classroom? That then leads to people like me showing up at the preschool to teach yoga. So there's a lot more yoga in schools now than there was back when I started my career. And it's largely due to books like yours. So I highly recommend that everyone goes out and get a copy of that. It's a great read. Thank you, John, too, for remembering to do all of that. We're going to link everything in the show notes. Absolutely. So people can find you.
And pilots are just big kids anyway, so it's going to work on us one way or the other. Speaking of buying your book, Lisa, where would I find it if I wanted to purchase it?
You can find it on Amazon. You can also find it through my publisher, Balboa Press. It's Creating Calm in Your Classroom. You can also find it on my website, createcalm.org.
Wonderful.
Everything will be in the show notes too. People go tappity with your fingers. Buy the book. Link all of the good things there. Her website is very robust too. There's a lot of information on your website, a lot of resources there as well. Lisa Danahy, this has been a treasure trove of all kinds of things, to the playful, to the profound. I think we've covered it all. Cannot thank you enough. I think it's going to be a really great resource for the pilot community. Thank you for being so generous to share your expertise.
It has been my pleasure. I see you all. I feel you all. I'm grateful for you all, and I'm thrilled to be part of your world.
Listeners, I found Lisa to be a breath of fresh air, and I really enjoyed her enthusiasm and clarity about the importance and the difficulty of a lot of this work. John, Lisa gave us a really great view on resiliency, and we dove into it. But can you give us kind of the synopsis for what she said, the elevator pitch for what resiliency is?
I can, but I see what you did there. Breath of fresh air.
Yoga nerd jokes.
Yeah. The summary here is basically resilience is not just a mental construct of how we think about a situation. It is a psychological capacity to self-regulate and adapt, which manifests as persistence, centeredness, and an ability to navigate stress without letting it define who you are, which is honestly a lot of why we started this podcast to begin with.
Absolutely. And what I really liked about her is I feel like she bridged the gap between the intellectual about knowing what resiliency is, but really coming back to again and again that it's a response you can train your body to have to stress. So that even if your mind gets taken over with perfectionism or stress in an emergency, your body is going to be more able to go to that default setting of resiliency if you've trained it outside of the cockpit. And that really came through in the interview. I think it was great. One framework that really stood out for me was her framework of the 3Ds. And I've been thinking since we recorded it how aviators can apply this to their lives as aviators, but also your life in general. So the 3Ds was her take on how to maintain that present moment awareness. And she called it decipher, discern, and decide. So it's a method for when you either find yourself mentally spiraling on something or you find yourself even in an emergency situation. Decipher, number one, how am I feeling? Where is my energy going right now? Discern, am I too high? Am I too low? And then decide, how am I going to handle my current state? Do I need to shift up or shift down? And I think that this framework, the 3Ds, can apply to an emergency situation as well. Decipher what's going on, discern, do I need to take action or not, and decide what is my next action that I'm going to take. For me, when I'm in a high stress mode, having a little bit of a framework that I can fall back, the 3Ds, what are they, really helps because sometimes we lose our executive functioning when either emotions are high or stress is high. And so having the 3Ds is something I can pull in a moment when I need to come back to and get my executive functioning, that thinking part of my cerebral cortex to click back on. So I'm going to tuck away the 3Ds in my toolbox. I think that's a really great framework for us to think about. Takes us out of that feeling powerless mode and into executive functioning mode. There was so much great wisdom from this. Listeners, if there's anything that stuck out for you, that definition of resiliency, the 3Ds, or any other little thing that kind of pinged your brain and made you think about things a little differently, please feel free to drop us an email, calmcockpit@gmail.com. We love to hear from you. We absolutely love to have those dialogues, and it really helps us to inform what's going to come up in season 2. We got a lot of it planned, but we're always looking for new ideas.
We do. And I think that it's serendipitous, the scheduling of this episode. Originally, we were a little bit concerned of airing an episode the week of Christmas, but something like this that talks about bringing yourself back and resiliency around the holidays, that's not a bad thing. So as you are enjoying your family, as you are enjoying your holiday, when that stress starts to creep up, the Calm Cockpit doesn't just apply to flying. So maybe use this as a way to bring yourself back and enjoy the moments around you.
What great advice, John. See, like I said, you're brilliant. You're just brilliant, man. And we also decided to break out that little mindfulness resiliency break that Lisa gave us into a bonus episode. So that will be released, I believe, on Christmas Eve.
Yes.
Yay. So you actually will have a little breakout session that you can pull out, take yourself to a quiet space in the family home and take a little bit of a break. I personally love little breaks like that because she's right. You can't always take a big long rest, but you can take a few minutes to reset. It's kind of like clearing off the whiteboard or clearing off the chalkboard. Gets rid of the residue of everything that happened and helps to set you up to be more present. So look for that little extra bonus Calm Cockpit gift coming your way on Christmas Eve. We are so grateful again, listeners, for everything that has happened in this past year. I can't believe that's a wrap on season 1. It feels like it was yesterday, John, that you called me and said, or texted me and said, hey, want to start a podcast? And I said, yes. And here we are.
Who knew?
Who knew? In the meantime, as I said, drop us an email, calmcockpit@gmail.com. Find us over on Facebook, Calm Cockpit Podcast, Instagram as well. And I guess that's a wrap on season 1 with lots of love and joy in my heart to you and yours. As always, fly smarter
and stress less.
Boston Tower 1 departure is Airbus 321. Traffic holding crossing runway 33 left, 3 left.